"Your daughter's painting looks like something my dog could do with its tail." The words hit me like a physical blow, followed by that cruel, dismissive laugh that still echoes in my nightmares. 6 months of encouraging my daughter Emma's artistic passion. 6 months of watching her little face light up as she mixed colors with the intensity of a master painter. 6 months of believing in her extraordinary gift, all reduced to mockery by someone who was supposed to understand art. But what Dr. Patricia Whitman didn't know that gray October evening was that I had already set wheels in motion that would turn her condescending world upside down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Sarah Martinez, and I never expected my quiet life in Austin would become a battlefield over my 6-year-old's artistic soul. At 34, I thought I had figured out my place in the world. I ran a small but successful freelance graphics design business from my converted garage studio, creating logos and marketing materials for local businesses. My husband Michael worked as a software engineer downtown, and we had built what felt like the perfect suburban life on Austin's east side. Our house wasn't fancy, a modest 3-bedroom with a backyard where Emma could run around with our golden retriever, Max, but it was ours. Emma had always been different. While other kids her age were content with crayons and coloring books, she gravitated toward my art supplies with an intensity that surprised me. I first noticed it when she was 4, the way she would stand transfixed, in front of paintings at the local coffee shops we'd visit, studying brushstrokes and color combinations with the focus of someone 3 times her age. She would ask questions that caught me off guard, wondering why the artist chose blue instead of purple for shadows, or how they made the paint look like it was moving. By the time she turned 5, Emma had claimed a corner of my studio as her own workspace. I set up a child-sized easel and stocked it with washable paints, thinking she'd make typical kid art, handprint turkeys, and stick figure families. Instead, she created these abstract compositions that seemed to pulse with emotion. Her color choices were unconventional, mixing oranges and purples in ways that shouldn't have worked, but somehow created these luminous, almost spiritual effects. She painted with her whole body, dancing around the canvas, layering colors intuitively. Michael was supportive but practical about Emma's artistic inclinations. He'd frame her paintings and hang them in his office, proudly showing them to coworkers, who would smile politely and comment on how creative she was. But I could see something more in her work, something that reminded me of the contemporary pieces I'd studied in art school before pivoting to commercial design. There was a sophistication to her color relationships and composition that seemed impossible for someone who hadn't yet learned to read properly. When Emma's first-grade teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, suggested entering one of Emma's paintings in the annual Riverside Elementary School art exhibition, I was thrilled. The exhibition was a big deal in our school district, with local artists and community members serving as judges. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to give Emma's talent some recognition and maybe connect with other parents who appreciated children's creativity. The painting we chose was one of Emma's favorites, a piece she called Sunshine After Storm. She had painted it during a week when Austin was hit by severe thunderstorms, and the canvas captured something profound about resilience and hope. Dark, churning grays and deep purples dominated the bottom half, painted with bold, aggressive strokes that conveyed the chaos of the storm. But emerging from this darkness were brilliant yellows and golds that seemed to lift off the canvas, painted with delicate, almost ethereal touches that suggested sunlight breaking through clouds. What made the painting remarkable wasn't just the emotional content, but the technical execution. Emma had somehow understood how to use contrast and light in ways that most adult painters struggle with. The way she had layered the paint created this incredible depth, with some areas thick and textured while others were transparent and luminous. Looking at it gave you the same feeling as stepping outside after a real storm and seeing that first shaft of sunlight. The night of the exhibition, Michael and I dressed up and brought Emma along, thinking it would be educational for her to see how her work looked displayed alongside other children's art. The school gymnasium had been transformed with professional lighting and display boards, and I was impressed by the effort the PTA had put into making it feel like a real gallery opening. There were even wine and cheese stations for the adults, giving the whole event a sophisticated atmosphere. Emma was fascinated by seeing so many different artworks together. She moved from piece to piece with genuine curiosity, commenting on techniques and asking me questions about different approaches. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and several other parents struck up conversations with us about her obvious passion for art. Everything felt perfect until we encountered the judges making their rounds. Dr. Patricia Whitman was supposed to be the crown jewel of the judging panel. She owned the most prestigious contemporary art gallery in downtown Austin and had connections to the larger Texas art scene. Her bio in the program mentioned exhibitions she had curated and articles she had written for art magazines. When I saw her approaching Emma's painting, I felt a surge of excitement, imagining how wonderful it would be to have a real art professional recognize my daughter's talent. Dr. Whitman was exactly what you'd expect from someone who spent her time in the rarefied world of high-end art galleries. Tall and elegant, probably in her early 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon and wearing what looked like an expensive black dress, accessorized with statement jewelry that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that comes from being the smartest person in most rooms, and she had perfected that particular way of looking at art with one eyebrow slightly raised, as if constantly evaluating whether something deserved her attention. I watched from across the room as she approached Sunshine After Storm, expecting to see that moment of recognition when an expert realizes they're looking at something special. Instead, her expression shifted to what I can only describe as barely concealed amusement. She called over her fellow judges, two local artists whose work I respected, and began gesturing at Emma's painting while shaking her head. Unable to contain my curiosity and pride, I walked over with Emma, thinking, Dr. Whitman might want to meet the young artist behind the work. That was my first mistake. The moment I introduced Emma as the painter, Dr. Whitman's expression changed from professional assessment to something approaching pity. "Oh, how sweet," she said in that tone adults use when they're about to deliver criticism disguised as kindness. "Your daughter certainly has a lot of enthusiasm for art." The way she emphasized enthusiasm made it clear she considered it a poor substitute for actual talent. I should have walked away then, but something in me needed to hear more. Maybe I was hoping for constructive feedback, or maybe I was just so proud of Emma's work that I couldn't believe anyone wouldn't see its merit. "We think she has a real gift," I said, immediately regretting how defensive I sounded. Dr. Whitman smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Children's art is charming in its own way, of course. It's wonderful that she enjoys expressing herself." She paused, looking back at the painting with an expression that suggested she was trying to find something diplomatic to say. "Though, I have to say, this particular piece lacks the fundamental understanding of color theory and composition that we look for in serious artistic work." The other judges looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing the tension that was building. One of them, a kind-looking woman who taught art at the local community college, tried to soften the blow. "What Dr. Whitman means is that there's always room for growth and learning in art education." But Dr. Whitman wasn't interested in diplomacy. Perhaps she felt her expertise was being questioned, or maybe she genuinely believed she was providing valuable education about artistic standards. Either way, she decided to elaborate on her critique with the kind of detailed analysis that would have been devastating even for an adult artist. "You see," she said, addressing me while gesturing at Emma's painting, "real art requires technical mastery combined with conceptual sophistication. This," she waved dismissively at Sunshine After Storm, "is essentially random color application without understanding of fundamental principles. The composition lacks intentionality, the color relationships are arbitrary, and the overall effect is chaotic rather than controlled. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger, but Emma was standing right beside me, listening to every word. I couldn't cause a scene at her school event, but I also couldn't stand there and let this woman demolish my daughter's confidence. "I think you might be missing the emotional content of the piece," I said as evenly as I could manage. That's when Dr. Whitman laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh exactly, more like the kind of gentle chuckle you might give to a child who insists they can fly. "My dear, emotion without technique is just therapy, not art. Your daughter's painting looks like something my dog could do with its tail." She turned to her fellow judges as if seeking confirmation of this assessment. "Children this age simply don't have the cognitive development necessary for genuine artistic expression. What you're seeing is purely accidental." The gymnasium seemed to have gone quiet around us. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Though I'm sure that was just my perception, as all my attention focused on protecting Emma from this crushing assessment. My daughter was looking up at Dr. Whitman with wide eyes, not fully understanding the technical criticism, but clearly grasping that her work was being dismissed as worthless. "I think we should look at some of the other entries," I said, taking Emma's hand and trying to guide us away from the conversation. But Dr. Whitman wasn't finished. "Please don't take this personally," she called after us, her voice carrying just enough volume that nearby parents could hear. "I'm simply trying to provide realistic expectations about children's artistic development. It's important not to inflate a child's sense of their abilities beyond what's developmentally appropriate." We made it through the rest of the evening. Somehow, with Emma putting on a brave face and me struggling to contain my rage and humiliation. The worst part wasn't even Dr. Whitman's assessment of the painting, though that stung deeply. It was the way other parents looked at us afterward, some with sympathy, others with that uncomfortable expression people get when they've witnessed someone else's public embarrassment. Emma didn't say much on the drive home, but when we were getting her ready for bed, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Mama, is my painting really bad like that lady said?" I knelt down to her level, looking into those serious brown eyes that had always seemed older than her years. "Emma, that lady doesn't understand your art. She's looking for something different than what you create, and that doesn't make your painting bad or wrong." "But she knows about art," Emma said with the logical persistence that 6-year-olds excel at. "She has a gallery and everything." I struggled to find words that would preserve her confidence without dismissing the very real hurt she was experiencing. Sometimes people who know a lot about one kind of art have trouble seeing the beauty in other kinds. "Your painting made me feel something important when I looked at it, and that's what good art is supposed to do." That night, after Emma was asleep, I stood in my studio looking at Sunshine After Storm and several of her other paintings that I had propped against the walls. In the soft light of my desk lamp, away from the harsh gallery lighting and Dr. Whitman's withering critique, I could see again what had initially captured my attention about Emma's work. The sophistication was still there, the intuitive understanding of how colors could create emotional responses, the fearless approach to composition that most adult artists spend years trying to recapture. Michael found me there around midnight, staring at the paintings with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "You're not still thinking about what that woman said, are you?" he asked, settling into the old armchair I kept in the corner for when clients came by. "I can't get it out of my head," I admitted. The way she dismissed Emma's work so completely, like it was obvious to everyone that it was worthless. And maybe she's right. Maybe I'm just a proud mother who can't see objectively. Michael was quiet for a moment, studying the paintings himself. He didn't have an art background, but he had always been supportive of my creative work and had developed a decent eye for design through years of living with me. "I don't know much about art theory," he said finally, "but I know these paintings make me feel something. Isn't that what matters?" His words echoed what I had told Emma. But they didn't entirely quiet the doubts that Dr. Whitman had planted. What if I had been encouraging Emma in something she wasn't actually good at? What if my own failed dreams of being a fine artist instead of a commercial designer had blinded me to the reality of my daughter's abilities? But as I stood there looking at sunshine after storm, I realized something that would change everything. Dr. Whitman had been wrong about one crucial thing. Emma's color choices and composition weren't random or accidental. There was an intentionality to her work that became more obvious the longer you studied it. The way she had used warm colors to suggest hope emerging from the cool grays of the storm wasn't arbitrary. It was sophisticated color theory applied intuitively. That's when I made a decision that would set everything in motion. If Dr. Whitman represented the local art establishment's opinion of children's artistic capabilities, then maybe the local art establishment needed to be challenged. Emma's work deserved to be seen by people who could recognize genuine talent regardless of the artist's age. I spent the next 3 hours researching national competitions and exhibitions that featured children's art. To my surprise, there was an entire world of serious children's art appreciation that I had been completely unaware of. Museums across the country held exhibitions specifically for young artists, and there were prestigious competitions with panels of judges who specialized in identifying artistic talent in children. The more I read, the more convinced I became that Emma's work belonged in this larger conversation about children's artistic development. Dr. Whitman had dismissed her paintings as developmentally impossible, but the articles I was finding suggested that genuine artistic talent could indeed emerge at very young ages, and that the key was recognizing it rather than dismissing it. By 3 a.m, I had filled out applications for 6 different competitions and exhibitions, photographed Emma's best pieces with professional lighting, and written artist statements that positioned her work within the context of contemporary art theory. If Dr. Whitman wanted to judge Emma's art by professional standards, then professional standards were exactly what we would pursue. The next few months became a careful balancing act between supporting Emma's continued artistic development and building a case for her talent that would be impossible to dismiss. I didn't tell her about the competitions I had entered her work in, not wanting to put pressure on her or raise expectations that might not be met. Instead, I focused on creating more opportunities for her to paint and develop her skills. I converted part of my studio into a proper children's art space, with better lighting and a wider variety of materials for Emma to experiment with. I started documenting her process more carefully, taking photos and videos that showed the intentionality behind her choices. What emerged was a clear pattern of sophisticated decision-making that belied her age. Emma would spend sometimes an hour just mixing colors on her palette, testing combinations with the focus of someone conducting scientific experiments. She had developed her own technique for layering paint that created these incredible depth effects, and she had an intuitive understanding of negative space that allowed her compositions to breathe in ways that felt mature and confident. More importantly, she was developing her own artistic voice. Each new painting built on techniques she had discovered in previous work, showing a progression that suggested genuine artistic growth rather than random creative play. She was beginning to develop themes in her work, returning again and again to the interaction between light and darkness, chaos and order, storm and calm. The first response came in January, 3 months after that humiliating night at the school exhibition. The National Youth Arts Foundation had selected Sunshine After Storm as a finalist in their annual competition for artists aged 6 to 12. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning while Emma was at school, and I had to read it 3 times before I believed what it was saying. Not only had Emma's painting been selected as a finalist, but the judges had specifically commented on the sophistication of her color work and composition. One judge, a curator from the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Education Department in New York, had written that the piece showed remarkable understanding of abstract expressionist principles rarely seen in such young artists. I called Michael at work, practically shouting with excitement as I read him the letter over the phone. For the first time since that awful night with Dr. Whitman, I felt vindicated in believing that Emma's talent was genuine and significant. But the National Youth Arts Foundation was just the beginning. Over the next 2 months, responses started arriving from the other competitions and exhibitions I had entered. Emma's work was accepted into 4 out of 6 programs, including a prestigious exhibition at the Children's Museum of Indianapolis and a competition sponsored by the Smithsonian Institution. Each acceptance letter reinforced what I had believed about Emma's artistic abilities, but more importantly, they provided professional validation that would be impossible for someone like Dr. Whitman to dismiss. These weren't local art teachers being kind to a cute kid. These were national institutions with rigorous selection processes and expert judges. The most significant response came in March, just as Austin was starting to warm up and the spring. Art season was getting underway. James Chen, the director of the Austin Children's Museum, had somehow learned about Emma's work through his connections in the national children's art community. His email was brief, but stunning in its implications. He had heard about a young Austin artist whose work was gaining attention in national competitions, and he was interested in potentially featuring her in an upcoming exhibition about emerging talent in children's art. Would I be willing to bring Emma and her portfolio to the museum for a consultation? I stared at that email for probably 10 minutes, reading it over and over to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. James Chen wasn't just any museum director. He had previously worked at major institutions in New York and Los Angeles before coming to Austin. His exhibitions regularly received coverage in national art publications, and his eye for talent was widely respected. This was exactly the kind of professional recognition that would prove, once and for all, that Emma's artistic abilities were genuine and significant. But more than that, it was an opportunity to show Dr. Whitman and everyone else who had dismissed Emma's work that they had been catastrophically wrong. The meeting with James Chen was scheduled for a Saturday morning in April, exactly 6 months after that devastating night at the school exhibition. I spent the week before carefully selecting which pieces to include in Emma's portfolio, choosing paintings that showed both her range and her artistic development over the past year. Emma was excited but not nervous about visiting the museum. She loved art museums and had been asking when we could go back to see the new exhibitions. She didn't fully understand the significance of the meeting, which I thought was probably for the best. If this didn't go well, I didn't want her to experience another crushing disappointment. James Chen turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an easy manner that immediately put Emma at ease. He had arranged for us to meet in one of the museum's education rooms, where he had set up proper lighting and display easels for viewing Emma's work. "I have to tell you," he said as we were setting up the paintings, "I've been following Emma's work in the national competitions with great interest. It's unusual to see such sophisticated color relationships and compositional understanding from such a young artist." As he moved from painting to painting, examining them with the same serious attention he might give to work by established artists, I felt a familiar surge of pride mixed with vindication. This was what I had always seen in Emma's work, this quality that demanded to be taken seriously regardless of the artist's age. "This piece in particular," he said, stopping in front of Sunshine After Storm, "shows remarkable maturity in its handling of abstract concepts. The way she's used color temperature to create emotional content is really quite sophisticated." Emma had been quietly observing this process, occasionally answering James's gentle questions about her techniques. An inspiration? When he asked her about Sunshine After Storm, she explained her thinking with the same clarity and intentionality that I had recognized from the beginning. "I wanted to show how the sun feels different after it rains," she said simply. "Like, it's more important because you missed it." James nodded, as if this was the most natural thing in the world for a 6-year-old to articulate. "That's exactly what comes through in the painting. You've managed to capture that emotional transformation through your color choices." After he had examined all the pieces in the portfolio, James sat down with Emma and me to discuss what he was thinking. I would very much like to feature Emma's work in our upcoming exhibition, Young Visionaries, Emerging Talent in Contemporary Art. It's a show that positions children's art within the broader context of contemporary artistic practice. He went on to explain that the exhibition would include work by young artists from around the country, and that it was intended to challenge conventional assumptions about when genuine artistic talent could be recognized and validated. Emma's work would be displayed alongside pieces by other children whose abilities had been recognized by major institutions. But then he said something that made my heart skip a beat entirely. I'm also interested in potentially acquiring Sunshine After Storm for the museum's permanent collection. We have a fund specifically for adding significant works by emerging artists, and I believe Emma's piece would be an important addition. I'm not sure I managed to respond coherently to that statement. The idea that a legitimate museum director wanted to purchase Emma's painting for a permanent collection was so far beyond what I had hoped for when I first started entering her work in competitions that I could barely process it. Emma, with the resilience of childhood, took the news more calmly than I did. "You want to keep my painting so other people can see it?" she asked James. "Exactly," he replied. "We think it's important enough that people should be able to see it for years to come." The exhibition was scheduled to open in 2 months, with a public reception that would bring together the local art community, including many of the same people who had been present that night at the school exhibition. James suggested that we might want to invite some of the local art educators and gallery owners, since the show was intended to spark conversations about how we recognize and nurture artistic talent in young people. I knew immediately who would be at the top of my invitation list. The weeks following my meeting with James Chen felt like living in 2 different realities. During the day, I maintained our normal routine of school drop-offs, client meetings, and grocery runs. But underneath the ordinary surface, I was orchestrating what would become the most satisfying vindication of my life. Every spare moment was spent preparing for the exhibition, documenting Emma's artistic process, and carefully crafting the guest list for the opening reception. Emma continued painting with the same passionate intensity she had always shown, completely unaware that her art world was about to expand dramatically. She had started a new series inspired by the changing seasons, capturing the subtle shift, from winter to spring in Austin with colors that seemed to vibrate with life. Her latest piece, which she called Green Dreams, showed delicate shoots of new grass emerging through dark earth, painted with such sensitivity to light and growth that it took my breath away every time I looked at it. I had learned to trust Emma's artistic instincts completely by this point. When she announced that she wanted to experiment with larger canvas sizes, I bought her a 4-foot square canvas that dominated her corner of the studio. She approached it with the same methodical preparation she brought to smaller works, spending days just sitting in front of the blank surface, visualizing what she wanted to create. The resulting painting, which she titled Big Sky Feelings, became what I privately considered her masterpiece. Working with house painting brushes she had appropriated from our garage, she created sweeping gestural marks that captured the vast openness of Texas sky with an emotional intensity that felt almost overwhelming. The bottom third of the canvas was rendered in deep, rich earth tones that suggested the weight and solidity of land, while the upper portion exploded with layers of blue, white, and gold that seemed to lift off the surface. What impressed me most about Big Sky Feelings was how Emma had solved the compositional challenge of such a large format. Many adult painters struggle with scaling up their work, but she had instinctively understood how to adjust her brushwork and color relationships to accommodate the increased size. The painting had presence and authority that commanded attention from across the room. Michael had started bringing colleagues from work to see Emma's latest pieces, and their reactions reinforced my growing confidence in her abilities. These were educated professionals from various backgrounds, and while they might not have had formal art training, they responded to Emma's work with genuine surprise and admiration. One woman, an engineer who worked with Michael, spent nearly an hour studying big sky feelings, and finally asked if Emma had taken classes with any particular teacher. "She's entirely self-taught," I explained, which seemed to astonish everyone who saw her work. The idea that such sophisticated artistic understanding could emerge naturally, without formal instruction, challenged assumptions about how artistic talent develops. I began documenting not just Emma's finished paintings, but her creative process as well. I set up a video camera to record her painting sessions, capturing the deliberate way she mixed colors, the confident gestures she used to apply paint, and the moments of intense concentration when she would step back and study her work before making the next mark. Watching these videos later, I was struck by how professional Emma's approach had become. She had developed her own systematic method for beginning a painting, starting with broad color areas and gradually building up layers of detail and texture. She would sometimes spend an entire session working on just one small section of a canvas, perfecting the relationship between adjacent colors with the patience of someone 3 times her age. The video documentation also captured something that was difficult to explain to people who hadn't witnessed it firsthand: Emma's complete absorption in her work. When she was painting, everything else disappeared for her. She would work for hours without breaking her concentration, emerging from these creative sessions with the slightly dazed expression of someone returning from a different world. These videos would later become crucial evidence of Emma's genuine, artistic sophistication, providing undeniable proof that her work was the result of intentional creative decisions rather than accidental effects. But at the time, I was simply trying to capture and preserve the remarkable process I was witnessing every day in my studio. As the exhibition date approached, James Chen and I worked together to select the final pieces that would represent Emma's work in Young Visionaries. In addition to Sunshine After Storm, which would be featured prominently as a potential museum acquisition, we chose 5 other paintings that showed the range and development of her artistic voice. The selection process required careful consideration of how Emma's work would be perceived by viewers encountering it for the first time. We needed pieces that would immediately demonstrate her technical sophistication while also showing the emotional depth that made her paintings compelling. James had experience presenting children's art to adult audiences, and he understood how to position young artists' work within contexts that would be taken seriously. The key, he explained during one of our planning meetings, is to let the work speak for itself without over-explaining or making excuses for the artist's age. Emma's paintings are strong enough to stand on their own merits. This philosophy would guide how we approached the entire exhibition. Emma's age would be noted in the wall text, but the focus would be on the artistic achievement rather than on the novelty of such young talent. Her work would be displayed with the same professional presentation standards used for any serious art exhibition. James also suggested that I prepare a brief artist statement that could be included in the exhibition materials. This presented an interesting challenge, since Emma was too young to articulate her artistic philosophy in conventional terms, but old enough to have clear ideas about what she was trying to accomplish in her work. I solved this by having extended conversations with Emma about her paintings, asking her to explain what she was thinking about when she made particular choices. Her responses revealed a sophisticated understanding of her own creative process, even if she expressed it in 6-year-old language. "I like colors that surprise you," she told me when I asked about her unconventional color combinations. "Like when you think something should be blue, but purple makes it more true." "More true" became a phrase that appeared frequently in our conversations about art. Emma had developed her own vocabulary for describing what she was trying to achieve, and while it wasn't academic language, it demonstrated clear artistic intentionality. When she explained big sky feelings, she said she wanted to paint how big the sky feels when you lie down in the grass and look up. The painting captured exactly that sense of vast openness and infinite possibility that you experience when looking up at an unlimited sky. These conversations became the foundation for an artist's statement that presented Emma's work in her own words, while still providing the kind of context that adult viewers would need to understand her artistic development. James was particularly impressed by Emma's ability to articulate her creative goals, noting that many professional artists struggled to explain their work as clearly as she could. The invitation list for the opening reception became a carefully curated selection of Austin's art community, local art educators, museum supporters, and what I privately thought of as witnesses to Emma's vindication. I included everyone who had been present that night at the school exhibition, along with several prominent local artists and collectors who I knew through my graphic design work. Dr. Patricia Whitman's name was at the top of the list, of course. I crafted her invitation personally, making sure to mention that the exhibition featured work by emerging artists whose talent had been recognized by major national institutions. I didn't mention Emma specifically, wanting her discovery of my daughter's inclusion to be a surprise. The weeks leading up to the opening were filled with final preparations and mounting excitement. Emma was thrilled about having her paintings displayed in a real museum, and she had chosen her outfit for the reception with the seriousness of someone attending a state dinner. She wanted to wear her favorite dress, a navy blue velvet one with a lace collar that made her look like a Victorian child prodigy. I had chosen my own outfit with equal care, selecting a classic black dress that would photograph well and convey the kind of understated sophistication that I hoped would contrast sharply with the chaos and humiliation of that night at the school exhibition. This time, I would be prepared for any criticism or dismissal that might come our way. The day before the opening, James took Emma and me through the exhibition space to see how her work looked in the final installation. The museum's galleries had been transformed into an elegant presentation of children's art that rivaled any professional contemporary art exhibition I had ever seen. Emma's paintings were beautifully lit and professionally framed, displayed at heights that allowed both adults and children to view them comfortably. Sunshine After Storm occupied a place of honor on the main wall of the central gallery, with a small placard indicating that it was being considered for acquisition by the museum's permanent collection. Seeing Emma's work in this context, surrounded by pieces from other talented young artists from around the country, reinforced everything I had believed about her abilities. Her paintings held their own among work by children who had been recognized by major institutions, and in some cases, her technical sophistication and emotional depth surpassed what the other young artists had achieved. Emma walked through the galleries with quiet pride, studying not just her own work, but the paintings by other children as well. She was particularly drawn to a series of landscape paintings by an 8-year-old from Oregon, whose use of light reminded her of her own experiments with color temperature. She understands about making colors glow, Emma observed, demonstrating the same analytical eye she brought to her own work. Look how she made the water look like it has light inside it. James overheard this comment and was visibly impressed by Emma's ability to recognize and articulate sophisticated artistic techniques in other people's work. That's exactly right, he told her. Not everyone notices those kinds of details. The night of the opening reception, I felt a nervous excitement that reminded me of my wedding day, that same mixture of anticipation and certainty that something significant was about to happen. Michael had taken the afternoon off work to help with last-minute preparations, and he could sense how important this evening was going to be for our family. "Are you ready for this?" he asked as we were getting dressed. I had been thinking about this question for months, ever since that humiliating night when Dr. Whitman dismissed Emma's work so completely. "I've been ready since October," I told him, and I meant it. Every application I had filled out, every competition I had entered Emma's work in, every conversation with James Chen had been building toward this moment when we would prove that Emma's artistic talent was genuine and significant. Emma seemed remarkably calm for someone about to have her first major art exhibition opening. She had spent the afternoon painting as usual, completely absorbed in a new piece she was working on. Art remained for her what it had always been, a natural and necessary form of expression rather than a source of anxiety or performance pressure. We arrived at the museum early, before the official opening time, so Emma could see the galleries, filled with visitors for the first time. The transformation was remarkable. The spaces that had seemed elegant but quiet during our preview were now alive with conversation and movement as people discovered and discussed the work of these young artists. I watched Emma's face as she realized that all these adults were here specifically to look at paintings made by children, to take their artistic achievements seriously enough to dress up and spend their evening engaging with the work. It was a revelation for her about how art could connect with audiences beyond the immediate family and school communities she was familiar with. "Look, Mama," she whispered, tugging on my dress as we stood near Sunshine After Storm. "That man is taking a picture of my painting." Indeed, a distinguished-looking gentleman in a gray suit was photographing Emma's work with the kind of serious attention typically reserved for important artworks. When he noticed us watching, he approached and introduced himself as a collector who specialized in contemporary Texas artists. "I wanted to compliment the young artist on this remarkable piece," he said, addressing Emma directly. "The way you've handled the transition from storm to sunshine is really quite sophisticated. Have you been painting long?" Emma launched into an explanation of her artistic development with the enthusiasm she brought to all her favorite subjects, describing her techniques and inspirations with clarity that impressed this experienced collector. He listened with genuine attention, asking follow-up questions that showed he was taking her work seriously as art, rather than dismissing it as cute child's play. This interaction set the tone for the entire evening. Throughout the reception, Emma found herself in conversations with serious art lovers who were genuinely interested in her work and her creative process. Rather than being talked down to or treated as a novelty, she was engaged as a fellow artist whose ideas and techniques were worthy of adult attention and respect. I spent much of the evening positioned where I could observe these interactions, while also watching for the arrival of certain guests whose reactions I was particularly eager to witness. The local art teachers who had been present at the school exhibition arrived early and were visibly impressed by the professional presentation of Emma's work. Several of them sought me out to congratulate me on Emma's achievements and to express their regret about the reception her work had received at the school event. Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma's first-grade teacher who had originally suggested entering Sunshine After Storm in the school exhibition, was nearly tearful with pride as she studied Emma's paintings in their museum setting. "I knew there was something special about her work," she told me, "but seeing it here in this context really shows how exceptional her talent is." The vindication felt sweet, but it was nothing compared to what was coming. At approximately 8:30, just as the reception was reaching its peak energy, I spotted a familiar figure entering the main gallery. Dr. Patricia Whitman had arrived, dressed in another elegant black ensemble and carrying herself with the same confident authority she had displayed that devastating night in October. She moved through the exhibition with her characteristic air of professional assessment, examining each piece with the critical eye that had so thoroughly dismissed Emma's work 6 months earlier. I watched from across the room as she progressed through the galleries, noting her expressions and reactions to different pieces. When she reached the central gallery where Sunshine After Storm was displayed, I felt my heart rate increase dramatically. This was the moment I had been anticipating and preparing for since that awful night when she had compared Emma's painting to something her dog could create with its tail. Dr. Whitman stopped in front of Sunshine After Storm with the same appraising look she had given it at the school exhibition. But this time, the context was completely different. Instead of a child's artwork hanging among elementary school projects, Emma's painting was professionally presented in a prestigious museum exhibition, marked with a placard indicating its potential acquisition for the permanent collection. I watched as Dr. Whitman read the wall text, her expression shifting from professional interest to what looked like confusion, and then to something approaching shock as she realized whose work she was looking at. The placard clearly identified the artist as Emma Martinez, age 6, from Austin, Texas. She stood there for several long minutes, studying the painting with obvious concentration. From across the room, I could see her mind working through the implications of what she was seeing. This was the same artwork she had dismissed so completely, now presented in a context that made her previous assessment look not just wrong, but embarrassingly uninformed. James Chen, who had been watching this scene unfold with as much interest as I had, chose that moment to approach Dr. Whitman and engage her in conversation about the exhibition. I couldn't hear their exchange from where I was standing, but I could see her gesturing toward Sunshine After Storm and asking what appeared to be pointed questions about the selection process and the artist's background. James's responses seemed to provide exactly the kind of professional validation that made Dr. Whitman's previous dismissal impossible to maintain. He was explaining Emma's recognition in national competitions, the interest from major institutions, and the sophisticated artistic development that had led to this museum exhibition. This was the moment I had been building toward for 6 months, the complete reversal of that humiliating evening when my daughter's artistic abilities had been so thoroughly dismissed. But rather than feeling triumphant, I found myself focusing on Emma's continued engagement with the other visitors, her obvious joy in seeing people respond positively to her work, and her growing confidence as a young artist whose talent was finally being recognized appropriately. The real victory wasn't proving Dr. Whitman wrong, although that certainly felt satisfying. The real victory was watching Emma discover that her artistic voice mattered, that her unique way of seeing and expressing the world had value that extended far beyond our family's pride and encouragement. As the evening continued, I overheard fragments of conversations throughout the galleries that reinforced everything I had believed about Emma's exceptional abilities. Visitors were using words like remarkable, sophisticated, and mature to describe her work, and several people asked for information about potentially purchasing pieces or commissioning new works. The transformation was complete. In 6 months, Emma had gone from having her work dismissed as random color application by a local gallery owner to being recognized as an emerging talent worthy of museum exhibition and potential acquisition. The same painting that Dr. Whitman had compared to something a dog could create with its tail was now being seriously considered for a permanent museum collection. But the evening held one more surprise that would exceed even my most optimistic expectations. As the reception was beginning to wind down, James Chen approached Emma and me with news that would fundamentally change how we thought about her artistic future. "I've been having conversations with several collectors and institutions tonight," he began, his excitement barely contained. "There's been extraordinary interest in Emma's work, and I wanted to discuss some opportunities that have emerged." He went on to explain that representatives from 3 major children's museums had approached him about potentially touring Emma's work as part of traveling exhibitions focused on exceptional young artists. Additionally, a prominent collector, who specialized in contemporary American art, had expressed serious interest in acquiring not just Sunshine After Storm, but potentially commissioning new works from Emma. "Most significantly," James continued, "I've been authorized to make a formal offer for the museum's acquisition of Sunshine After Storm. The acquisition committee reviewed the piece this afternoon and unanimously approved its addition to our permanent collection." The financial offer he named was modest by professional art market standards, but for a 6-year-old's first major sale, it represented validation that went far beyond monetary value. More importantly, it meant that Emma's work would be preserved and displayed for future generations, taking its place among the museum's collection of significant artworks. Emma listened to this news with the serious attention she brought to all important conversations, asking thoughtful questions about what it would mean for her painting to be owned by the museum. When James explained that many people would be able to see and enjoy her work for years to come, she nodded with satisfaction. "That sounds good," she said simply. "I want people to feel the sunshine after the storm like I did." As we prepared to leave that evening, I took one last look around the galleries where Emma's artistic journey had been so completely validated. 6 months earlier, I had watched my daughter's confidence shaken by an expert's dismissive assessment of her abilities. Tonight, I had watched her engage with serious art lovers who recognized and celebrated her exceptional talent. The drive. Home was quiet, with Emma falling asleep in her car seat while still wearing her navy velvet dress and clutching the small catalog from the exhibition that featured reproductions of her work alongside the other young artists. Michael and I exchanged looks of amazement and pride, still processing everything that had happened. "I can't believe how much has changed," Michael said as we pulled into our driveway. 6 months ago, we were consoling her after that awful woman's comments, and tonight, she sold her first painting to a museum. The transformation had been remarkable, but it had also been the result of careful planning, persistent effort, and unwavering belief in Emma's abilities. The success hadn't happened by accident. It had happened because I had refused to accept Dr. Whitman's assessment and had instead pursued professional validation from sources that understood and appreciated exceptional artistic talent in young people. As I carried sleeping Emma to her bedroom, I reflected on the lessons of the past 6 months. Sometimes the people who claim to be experts are limited by their own assumptions and biases. Sometimes a mother's instincts about her child's abilities are more accurate than professional assessments. And sometimes the best response to dismissive criticism is not argument, but proof. Emma's artistic journey was just beginning, but she now had the foundation of recognition and validation that would support her continued development. More importantly, she had learned that her unique artistic voice was valuable and worthy of serious attention, a lesson that would serve her well regardless of how her artistic interests evolved as she grew older. The next morning, Emma woke up and immediately asked if she could paint. Some things, thankfully, remained exactly the same. The weeks following the museum reception brought a flurry of activity that transformed our quiet Austin life into something I never could have anticipated. Emma's success at the Young Visionaries exhibition had created ripple effects throughout the local and national art communities, with inquiries arriving daily from collectors, educators, and media outlets interested in learning more about this remarkable 6-year-old artist. The most immediate change was in how people in our community began to perceive Emma's artistic abilities. Neighbors who had previously offered polite compliments about her cute paintings now spoke with genuine reverence about having a real artist living on their street. The shift in tone was dramatic and sometimes overwhelming, as people seemed to struggle with reconciling Emma's age with her evident artistic sophistication. Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor who had always been kind but somewhat distant, knocked on our door one morning with a request that perfectly captured this new dynamic. She had been following the coverage of Emma's museum exhibition in the local arts publications and wondered if Emma might consider painting a small piece for her living room. She was prepared to pay a commission fee, she explained somewhat awkwardly, because she now understood that Emma was a professional artist. The conversation that followed revealed how dramatically people's perceptions had shifted. Mrs. Patterson spoke about Emma's work with the same seriousness she might have used to discuss commissioning a piece from any established artist. She had specific ideas about size, colors, and subject matter, and she wanted to discuss timeline and pricing as if this were a standard business transaction. Emma listened to this conversation with fascination, asking thoughtful questions about what Mrs. Patterson hoped the painting would make her feel when she looked at it. This approach to understanding a client's emotional needs had become natural for Emma, who seemed to intuitively grasp that successful art created connections between the artist's vision and the viewer's experience. "I want something that makes my living room feel like spring," Mrs. Patterson explained. "Something hopeful and fresh, like the way the light looks when winter is finally ending." Emma nodded seriously and asked if she could visit Mrs. Patterson's living room to see the light and colors that were already there. This professional approach to commissioned work impressed our neighbor enormously and reinforced her growing conviction that she was dealing with a genuine artist despite Emma's age. The commission process that developed over the following weeks provided fascinating insights into Emma's artistic maturity. She approached the project with the same methodical preparation she brought to her personal work, but now she was also considering how her artistic vision could align with another person's specific needs and preferences. Emma spent an afternoon in Mrs. Patterson's living room, studying the quality of light at different times of day and taking note of the existing color palette in the furniture and decorations. She made small sketches in a notebook I had given her, exploring different compositional approaches that would work well with the intended display location. "The morning light comes in from this window," Emma explained to me later, pointing to her sketches. "So I want to paint something that will catch that light and make it feel bigger and warmer." The resulting painting, which Emma titled Morning Promise, became one of her most successful commissions. Working on a medium-sized canvas that would fit perfectly above Mrs. Patterson's sofa, she created a composition that suggested the gentle emergence of spring through subtle gradations of green, gold, and soft pink. The painting had the luminous quality that had become characteristic of her work, but it was also specifically designed to enhance the feeling of warmth and renewal that Mrs. Patterson had requested. When we delivered the finished piece, Mrs. Patterson's reaction was everything Emma could have hoped for. The painting seemed to transform the entire living room, creating a focal point that drew the eye while also harmonizing beautifully with the existing decor. The way the morning light interacted with Emma's color choices created exactly the sense of hope and freshness that had been requested. "This is exactly what I wanted," Mrs. Patterson said, tears forming in her eyes as she studied the painting in its new home. "It makes me feel like good things are coming." Emma beamed with the satisfaction of an artist whose work had successfully communicated its intended emotional message. The experience reinforced her growing understanding that art could be both personal expression and meaningful communication with others. Word of Emma's commission work spread quickly through our neighborhood and beyond, leading to additional requests from people who wanted original artwork created specifically for their homes or offices. Each new project presented unique challenges that pushed Emma to expand her technical skills and artistic problem-solving abilities. A local pediatrician asked Emma to create a series of small paintings for her waiting room, pieces that would help anxious children feel calmer and more hopeful. Emma approached this commission by spending time in the office, observing how children behaved in that environment and thinking about what kinds of images and colors might provide comfort and distraction. The resulting series, which Emma called Gentle Friends, featured soft, rounded forms and soothing blues and greens that suggested friendly creatures without being literally representational. The paintings had a dreamlike quality that invited imagination while avoiding anything that might seem scary or overwhelming to nervous young patients. Dr. Martinez, the pediatrician, was delighted with the series and reported that children responded positively to the new artwork, often pointing to favorite paintings and creating stories about what they saw in the abstract forms. Several parents asked about purchasing similar pieces for their children's bedrooms, leading to additional commission opportunities. These professional successes were gratifying, but they also brought new challenges that I hadn't anticipated. Managing Emma's growing reputation and the increasing demands on her time required careful balance to ensure that her artistic development remained joyful and age-appropriate. The most significant challenge came from an unexpected source. Dr. Patricia Whitman, whose dismissive assessment had started this entire journey, requested a meeting to discuss what she termed a potential collaboration opportunity. Her call came on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring, several weeks after the museum reception where she had witnessed Emma's triumphant validation. "I've been thinking about our conversation last fall," Dr. Whitman began, her voice carrying a tone of professional courtesy that hadn't been present during our previous encounters. "I may have been hasty in my initial assessment of Emma's artistic development. The understatement was breathtaking, but I listened politely as she continued to explain her new perspective. She had been following Emma's success in the national competitions and the museum exhibition, and she now believed that Emma's work deserved more serious attention from the established art community. "I would like to propose featuring Emma in a solo exhibition at my gallery," Dr. Whitman continued. "A show that would position her work within the context of contemporary artistic practice and introduce her to the serious collector community." The offer was simultaneously flattering and deeply problematic. A solo exhibition at the Whitman Gallery would indeed represent a significant step forward in Emma's artistic career, providing exposure to collectors and critics who could further establish her reputation. However, the proposal came from someone whose judgment had proven to be fundamentally flawed and whose motivations seemed questionable. I told Dr. Whitman that I would need to consider her proposal carefully and discuss it with Emma and my husband before making any decisions. What I didn't mention was my growing suspicion that her sudden interest in Emma's work had more to do with capitalizing on a rising star than with genuine appreciation for artistic talent. Over the following days, I researched Dr. Whitman's gallery more thoroughly, discovering a pattern of exhibitions that seemed designed more to generate publicity and sales than to advance serious artistic discourse. Her stable of represented artists included several whose work had achieved commercial success without necessarily demonstrating exceptional artistic merit. The contrast with James Chen's approach at the Children's Museum was striking. James had positioned Emma's work within educational and developmental contexts that honored both her artistic achievements and her age-appropriate needs. Dr. Whitman's proposal seemed focused primarily on the novelty value of such a young artist having a solo gallery exhibition. When I shared Dr. Whitman's offer with Michael, his reaction was immediate and negative. "This is the same woman who humiliated Emma 6 months ago," he pointed out. "Now she wants to profit from Emma's success? That seems incredibly opportunistic." Emma's response to the proposal was characteristically thoughtful and mature. When I explained that the gallery owner who had criticized her work at the school exhibition now wanted to display her paintings, she considered this information seriously before asking the question that cut to the heart of the matter. "Does she like my paintings now? Or does she just want to sell them?" The sophistication of this question impressed me enormously. Emma had intuited the difference between genuine artistic appreciation and commercial opportunism with clarity that many adult artists struggle to achieve. Her ability to recognize and articulate this distinction suggested an emotional intelligence that would serve her well as she navigated the complex world of professional art. I decided to decline Dr. Whitman's offer, but not before using the opportunity to address the damage her initial assessment had caused. I called to schedule a meeting at her gallery, ostensibly to discuss the exhibition proposal, but actually to ensure that she understood the impact of her previous behavior. The Whitman Gallery occupied an elegant space in downtown Austin's Arts District with high ceilings, polished concrete floors, and dramatic lighting that showcased contemporary paintings and sculptures. Dr. Whitman greeted me with professional warmth, offering coffee and settling into her office to discuss what she clearly assumed would be routine negotiations for Emma's solo exhibition. "I'm so excited about the potential for this show," she began enthusiastically. "Emma's work has generated tremendous interest in the collector community, and I believe we could position her for significant market success." The focus on market success rather than artistic development confirmed my suspicions about her motivations. When I asked about her vision for how Emma's work would be presented and contextualized, her responses emphasized commercial potential over educational or artistic considerations. "Obviously, we would need to be strategic about pricing," Dr. Whitman continued. "Work by such a young artist presents unique challenges in terms of establishing appropriate market value, but I believe we could generate substantial interest from collectors who specialize in emerging talent." I let her continue with her pitch for several minutes before steering the conversation toward the real reason for my visit. I'm curious about how your current assessment of Emma's work compares to your initial reaction at the school exhibition. Dr. Whitman's expression shifted slightly, showing the first sign of discomfort since I had arrived. As I mentioned on the phone, I may have been too quick to judge Emma's work in that context. School exhibitions aren't really the appropriate venue for serious artistic evaluation. This attempt to minimize her previous behavior by blaming the context rather than acknowledging her failure of judgment provided the opening I had been waiting for. Actually, the painting you dismissed that night was Sunshine After Storm, the same piece that the Children's Museum recently acquired for their permanent collection. The silence that followed was prolonged and uncomfortable. Dr. Whitman clearly recognized the implications of what I had just pointed out. Her dismissive assessment hadn't been the result of inappropriate context. It had been the result of her inability to recognize exceptional artistic talent when it was presented to her. The venue didn't change the painting, I continued calmly. The same brushstrokes, color relationships, and compositional sophistication that you dismissed as random color application are exactly what impressed the museum's acquisition committee. Dr. Whitman's professional composure began to crack as she realized that her credibility as an art expert was being directly challenged. I think perhaps we should focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on past misunderstandings, she said, her voice tighter than it had been earlier. I agree, I replied. Which is why I'm declining your exhibition offer. Emma's artistic development is too important to entrust to someone whose judgment has proven to be so fundamentally unreliable. The meeting concluded shortly thereafter, with Dr. Whitman maintaining professional courtesy while clearly understanding that her opportunity to profit from Emma's success had been definitively rejected. More importantly, she had been forced to confront the reality that her initial assessment had been not just wrong, but embarrassingly, publicly wrong. The vindication felt satisfying, but it was overshadowed by my growing awareness of how Emma's success was attracting attention from people whose motivations were questionable. The art world, I was learning, included individuals who were more interested in exploiting talent than nurturing it. This realization led to important conversations with James Chen about how to protect Emma's artistic development while still providing opportunities for her talent to be recognized and celebrated. James had experience guiding young artists through the challenges of early success, and his advice proved invaluable. The key is maintaining focus on Emma's artistic growth rather than her market potential, he explained during one of our consultations. Commercial success can be part of a young artist's journey, but it shouldn't become the primary goal. James recommended connecting with other families whose children had achieved early artistic recognition, creating a support network of people who understood the unique challenges we were facing. Through his connections, I was introduced to parents whose children had navigated similar journeys, and their experiences provided crucial guidance. One mother, whose daughter had achieved national recognition as a young sculptor, shared her strategy for managing media attention and commercial opportunities. We learned to say no to most requests, she explained. The key was being selective about opportunities that genuinely supported our daughter's artistic development, rather than just capitalizing on her age and talent. Another family had dealt with similar approaches from gallery owners who saw their son's youth as a marketing opportunity rather than appreciating his artistic abilities on their own merits. Their experience reinforced my decision to decline Dr. Whitman's exhibition offer. These conversations helped me develop criteria for evaluating future opportunities that Emma might receive. The primary consideration would always be whether a proposed project or exhibition would contribute to her artistic growth and education. Secondary considerations included the reputation and motivations of the individuals or institutions involved. Using these criteria, I began to identify the kinds of opportunities that would be most beneficial for Emma's continued development. Educational collaborations with children's museums and art centers seemed ideal, as they combined recognition of her talent with age-appropriate programming that could enhance her artistic understanding. A particularly exciting opportunity came from the Austin Art Center, which offered specialized classes for gifted young artists. The center had followed Emma's success with interest and proposed developing a mentorship program that would pair her with established artists who could provide guidance and inspiration. Emma was enthusiastic about the mentorship program, particularly when she learned that she would have the opportunity to explore new artistic techniques and materials under professional guidance. The program was designed to challenge her artistic abilities while maintaining the joy and spontaneity that made her work so compelling. Her first mentor was a watercolor artist named Patricia Kim, whose delicate landscapes had earned recognition throughout the Southwest. Patricia approached her work with Emma thoughtfully, recognizing that traditional teaching methods needed to be adapted for someone with Emma's unique combination of natural talent and developmental stage. Rather than focusing on technical instruction, Patricia encouraged Emma to experiment with watercolor's unique properties, exploring how the medium's transparency and fluidity could enhance her already sophisticated understanding of color relationships. The collaboration produced some of Emma's most beautiful work, pieces that combined her intuitive compositional sense with watercolor's luminous possibilities. Emma has an extraordinary natural understanding of how colors interact, Patricia reported after their first month of sessions. My role is simply to introduce her to new ways of exploring those relationships, rather than trying to teach her fundamental concepts she already grasps intuitively. The mentorship program also connected Emma with other young artists in the Austin area, creating a peer group of children who shared her passion for serious artistic work. These relationships proved valuable for Emma's social development, providing friendships with other children who understood her dedication to art. One of her new friends was Marcus, an 8-year-old sculptor whose abstract ceramic pieces had been featured in several regional exhibitions. Marcus and Emma discovered that they shared similar approaches to their work, both preferring to develop ideas through direct experimentation with materials rather than extensive preliminary planning. Their friendship led to collaborative projects that pushed both young artists to explore new creative territories. Working together on a mixed media installation for a local children's art festival, they created a piece that combined Emma's painted surfaces with Marcus's sculptural forms, resulting in work that neither could have achieved individually. The installation, titled Conversation in Color and Form, demonstrated Emma's growing ability to collaborate with other artists while maintaining her distinctive artistic voice. The piece received significant attention at the festival, with several adult artists commenting on the sophistication of the young collaborators' integration of different media and approaches. These positive experiences reinforced my growing confidence in the decisions I had made about managing Emma's artistic opportunities. By focusing on educational and developmental benefits rather than commercial potential, we had created a framework that supported her continued growth while protecting her from exploitation. The contrast with Dr. Whitman's approach became even more stark as the months passed. I learned through art community connections that she had attempted to approach several other young artists' families with similar exhibition proposals, suggesting a pattern of trying to capitalize on the novelty value of children's art rather than genuine appreciation for artistic talent. Meanwhile, Emma's work continued to evolve and mature through her mentorship experiences and collaborative projects. Her paintings were becoming more nuanced and sophisticated while retaining the emotional directness that had first attracted attention to her work. A new painting she completed during this period, titled Dancing Light, showed remarkable advancement in her technical abilities. Working with both watercolor and acrylic on the same canvas, she had created layered effects that suggested movement and transformation in ways that seemed almost impossible for someone her age to achieve. James Chen, who had become an unofficial advisor for Emma's artistic development, was particularly impressed by this piece. "Emma is developing her own unique artistic language," he observed. "She's not imitating adult artistic styles, but rather finding authentic ways to express her own vision that happen to demonstrate sophisticated technical understanding. This authentic artistic voice was exactly what I had hoped to protect." and nurture through careful management of Emma's opportunities and exposure. Rather than trying to accelerate her development or push her toward premature commercial success, we had focused on providing the right kinds of support and challenge to help her natural abilities flourish. The success of this approach was becoming evident not just in the quality of Emma's work, but in her continued enthusiasm for painting and her growing confidence as an artist. She was developing the kind of artistic identity that would serve her well, regardless of how her interests and abilities evolved as she matured. Most importantly, she remained the same joyful, curious child she had always been, someone for whom art was a natural and necessary form of expression, rather than a source of pressure or performance anxiety. The balance we had achieved between recognition and protection seemed to be working exactly as I had hoped. The turning point came on a crisp November morning, almost exactly 1 year after that devastating night at the school exhibition. I was working in my studio when the phone rang with news that would validate everything I had believed about Emma's extraordinary talent. Dr. Amanda Foster, the chief curator of contemporary art at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, was calling to discuss what she described as an unprecedented opportunity. "We've been following Emma's work through our connections in the children's art education community," Dr. Foster explained, her voice carrying the kind of professional excitement that immediately captured my attention. Her pieces in the national competitions have generated considerable discussion among our curatorial staff, and we'd like to propose something quite extraordinary. The Houston Museum of Fine Arts was planning a groundbreaking exhibition titled Prodigy's Exceptional Artistic Vision Across Generations, which would feature work by artists who had demonstrated remarkable abilities at unusually young ages. The exhibition would span several centuries, including historical examples of young masters alongside contemporary child artists, whose work showed comparable sophistication and promise. Emma's paintings demonstrate exactly the kind of intuitive artistic understanding that we're looking to highlight, Dr. Foster continued. We would like to feature 3 of her pieces in the exhibition, including Sunshine After Storm, which we understand has already been acquired by the Austin Children's Museum. The significance of this invitation was breathtaking. The Houston Museum of Fine Arts was a major institution with international recognition, and their decision to include Emma's work alongside historical prodigies represented validation at the highest level of the art world. This wasn't a children's exhibition or an educational program. It was a serious curatorial statement about exceptional artistic talent regardless of age. But Dr. Foster had even more remarkable news to share. We're also interested in commissioning a new piece specifically for this exhibition. We would like Emma to create a large-scale work that responds to the theme of artistic vision and creative development. The commission would come with a significant fee and would position Emma as one of the youngest artists ever to receive a major museum commission. The financial aspect of the commission was substantial enough to establish a college fund for Emma, but more importantly, it represented recognition of her as a serious artist whose work deserved to be created, displayed, and preserved at the institutional level. This was the kind of validation that I had dreamed of but never quite dared to expect. Emma's reaction to the news was characteristically thoughtful and mature. When I explained that a major museum wanted her to create a special painting about what it means to be an artist, she spent several minutes considering the implications before asking her first question. "Will other kids see my painting and think they can be artists too?" she asked, immediately grasping one of the most important potential impacts of her participation in such a high-profile exhibition. Her question revealed the kind of social consciousness that had been developing alongside her artistic abilities. Emma had begun to understand that her success could inspire other children to pursue their own creative interests, and she took this responsibility seriously. "I think that's exactly what might happen," I told her, impressed by her ability to see beyond personal recognition to the broader implications of her work. Emma nodded with satisfaction. "Then I want to make a painting that shows how art feels when you're doing it," not just how it looks when you're done. This conceptual approach to the commission demonstrated Emma's growing sophistication as an artist. Rather than simply creating another beautiful painting, she was thinking about how her work could communicate ideas and experiences to viewers. Her understanding of art as communication had deepened considerably over the past year. The commissioned piece that Emma created over the following 2 months became what many would later consider her masterpiece. Working on the largest canvas she had ever attempted, a 4-foot by 6-foot surface that dominated her studio space, she developed a composition that captured the pure joy and intense concentration of artistic creation. The painting, which she titled Inside the Making, used abstract forms and luminous colors to suggest the internal experience of being completely absorbed in creative work. Swirling movements of paint conveyed the energy and excitement of artistic discovery, while areas of calm, subtle color represented the deep focus that accompanied her most successful painting sessions. What made the piece remarkable was how Emma had managed to make visible something that is typically internal and invisible. The painting didn't depict someone making art. It somehow conveyed the feeling of making art from the inside. Viewers reported that looking at the piece made them want to pick up brushes themselves and experience that same creative energy. The technical execution of Inside the Making showed how dramatically Emma's abilities had developed through her mentorship, experiences, and continued experimentation. She had learned to control paint applications that created different textural effects, from smooth, luminous washes to thick, energetic impasto that seemed to pulse with movement. More importantly, she had developed her own unique approach to color that went beyond traditional color theory to create emotional and psychological effects that felt both sophisticated and completely natural. Her color choices seemed to bypass intellectual analysis and speak directly to viewers' feelings, creating immediate emotional connections. Dr. Foster's response when she first saw the completed commission confirmed that Emma had achieved something truly exceptional. This painting demonstrates artistic maturity that would be impressive from someone 3 times Emma's age, she wrote in her initial assessment. The way she has made the internal experience of creativity visible and accessible to viewers shows conceptual sophistication that places her work in conversation with major contemporary artists. The Prodigies exhibition opened in February with a gala reception that attracted art world attention from across the country. Major art critics, collectors, and museum professionals traveled to Houston specifically to see this unprecedented gathering of exceptional young artistic talent spanning several centuries. Emma's work was displayed in a gallery alongside paintings by historical child prodigies, including pieces by artists who had gone on to become major figures in art history. The curatorial presentation emphasized the continuity of exceptional, artistic vision across time periods, showing how certain kinds of talent transcend both age and historical context. The critical response to Emma's inclusion in the exhibition exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Sarah Williams, the art critic for Art in America, wrote a lengthy review that positioned Emma's work within the broader context of contemporary artistic practice, rather than dismissing it as remarkable only because of her age. Emma Martinez's paintings demonstrate the kind of intuitive understanding of color and composition that establishes her as a significant voice in contemporary abstract art, Williams wrote. The fact that she is 7 years old makes her achievements more remarkable but not more important than the genuine artistic sophistication her work displays. This critical recognition from a major art publication marked Emma's transition from being seen as a talented child to being recognized as a legitimate artist whose age was remarkable, but secondary to her artistic achievements. The shift in perception was exactly what I had hoped to achieve through careful management of her opportunities and development. The exhibition's success led to invitations for Emma to participate in additional museum shows and educational programs across the country. Rather than accepting every opportunity, we continued to be selective. choosing projects that would contribute to her artistic growth while maintaining appropriate boundaries around her childhood and education. One of the most meaningful invitations came from the Smithsonian Institution, which asked Emma to participate in a symposium on artistic education and talent development. The symposium would bring together educators, researchers, and young artists to discuss how exceptional artistic abilities could be identified and nurtured appropriately. Emma's participation in the symposium provided an opportunity for her to meet other young artists from around the country and to contribute to important conversations about artistic education. Her presentations about her own creative process impressed the adult participants with their clarity and insight. "I think the most important thing is to let kids try lots of different ways of making art," Emma told the symposium audience when asked about her recommendations for art education programs. "Sometimes the best ideas come when you're not trying to make them happen." This observation, while expressed in 7-year-old language, captured sophisticated understanding about the role of experimentation and intuition in artistic development. The adult educators in the audience recognized the wisdom in Emma's approach and incorporated her insights into their discussions about program development. The symposium also provided an opportunity for me to connect with researchers who were studying artistic talent development in children. Their findings reinforced my conviction that Emma's abilities were genuine and significant rather than simply precocious or temporary. Dr. Jennifer Liu, a developmental psychologist who specialized in exceptional artistic talent, conducted extensive assessments of Emma's work and creative process. Her conclusions validated everything I had observed about Emma's unusual abilities. Emma demonstrates genuine artistic talent that meets all the criteria we use to identify exceptional ability, Dr. Liu explained in her report. Her work shows technical sophistication, emotional depth, and conceptual understanding that indicate authentic artistic giftedness rather than simply advanced development for her age. This professional validation from the research community provided additional confirmation that Emma's success wasn't the result of parental ambition or marketing, but rather recognition of legitimate artistic achievement. The scientific backing for her abilities helped counter any remaining skepticism about whether such young children could produce genuinely sophisticated art. As Emma's 8th birthday approached, I reflected on the remarkable journey we had traveled together over the past 2 years. From that devastating night when Dr. Patricia Whitman dismissed her work as something a dog could create with its tail, to her current recognition as one of the most promising young artists in the country, Emma had proven that exceptional talent could emerge at any age and deserved to be taken seriously. The transformation hadn't just been in how others perceived Emma's work, it had also been in Emma's growing understanding of herself as an artist and her role in the broader art community. She had developed confidence in her abilities while maintaining the humility and curiosity that made her work so compelling. Perhaps most importantly, Emma had retained her love of painting throughout this period of recognition and success. Despite the attention and pressure that could have accompanied her achievements, she continued to approach her work with the same joy and enthusiasm that had first attracted my attention to her abilities. The vindication I had sought when I first started entering Emma's work in competitions had been achieved beyond my wildest expectations. But the real victory was in watching Emma develop into a confident, capable young artist who understood the value of her unique voice and vision. The irony of Dr. Whitman's original assessment wasn't lost on me as I watched Emma prepare for her latest museum exhibition. The woman who had dismissed Emma's artistic abilities so completely had inadvertently provided the motivation for me to seek the kind of professional validation that established Emma as one of the most recognized young artists in the country. In a strange way, Dr. Whitman's cruel dismissal had been essential to Emma's eventual success. If her work had been politely accepted at that school exhibition, I might never have pursued the national opportunities that led to her remarkable achievements. The humiliation had provided the determination necessary to prove, beyond any doubt, that Emma's talent was genuine and exceptional. Emma's story had become an inspiration for other families dealing with children whose abilities were dismissed or underestimated. Parents reached out regularly to share their own experiences and to ask for advice about advocating for their talented children. Emma's success provided proof that persistence and belief in a child's abilities could overcome initial skepticism and dismissal. The broader impact of Emma's recognition extended beyond individual families to influence discussions about how artistic talent was identified and nurtured in educational settings. Her example had contributed to changes in how some art programs approached assessment of children's work, with greater emphasis on recognizing sophisticated artistic understanding regardless of age. As I watched Emma work on her newest painting, a piece exploring the relationship between music and color that would be featured in an upcoming exhibition at the Kennedy Center, I marveled at how naturally she had grown into her role as a recognized artist. The external validation had enhanced rather than replaced her internal motivation, and she continued to paint primarily because she loved the process of creating. The studio space that had once been my converted garage had evolved into a professional workspace that accommodated both my graphic design business and Emma's increasingly ambitious artistic projects. The walls were lined with her paintings from different periods, creating a visual timeline of her artistic development that amazed visitors with its clear progression and consistent sophistication. Emma's success had also transformed our family's understanding of what was possible when talent was recognized and properly supported. Michael had become as invested in Emma's artistic development as I was, learning about art history and criticism so he could better understand and discuss her work. Our dinner conversations often centered on artistic techniques, exhibition strategies, and Emma's latest creative discoveries. The financial success that had accompanied Emma's recognition had provided security for our family and resources for Emma's continued artistic education, but it had never become the primary focus of our efforts. The real reward was in watching Emma develop her unique artistic voice, and in knowing that her talent was being properly recognized and cultivated. Looking toward the future, I felt confident that Emma's artistic journey would continue to unfold in positive and meaningful ways. The foundation of recognition and validation she had achieved provided a strong base for whatever directions her interests might take as she matured. Whether she continued as a visual artist or explored other creative fields, she would always have the confidence that comes from knowing her abilities are genuine and valuable. The lesson I had learned through this experience extended far beyond the specific circumstances of Emma's artistic talent. When someone you love is dismissed or underestimated, particularly by people who claim expertise or authority, the appropriate response isn't necessarily confrontation or argument. Sometimes, the most powerful response is simply proving, through persistent effort and unwavering belief, that the dismissal was wrong. Emma's story demonstrated that talent and ability can emerge at any age and in any context, and that recognizing and nurturing such abilities requires looking beyond conventional expectations and assumptions. The experts who initially dismissed her work had been limited by their own preconceptions about what children could accomplish, while those who recognized her talent had been able to see past her age to appreciate her genuine artistic achievements. As Emma put the finishing touches on her latest masterpiece, humming softly to herself as she worked, I reflected on how completely our lives had been transformed by refusing to accept one person's dismissive assessment. The woman who had laughed at my daughter's artistic abilities had inadvertently set in motion a journey that established Emma as one of the most promising young artists of her generation. The vindication was complete, but more importantly, Emma's artistic future was bright with possibilities that no one could dismiss or diminish. Her talent had been recognized at the highest levels of the art world, and she had developed the confidence and skills necessary to continue growing as an artist for years to come. The girl who had once been told her paintings looked like something a dog could create with its tail was now represented in major museum collections and featured in exhibitions that would inspire future generations of young artists. The transformation was complete, and the future held unlimited potential for whatever Emma might choose to create next. The phone call that would change everything came on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 18 months after that crushing night at Riverside Elementary. I was reviewing client proposals when my phone displayed a number I didn't recognize, but something about the timing felt significant enough that I answered immediately. "Mrs. Martinez, this is Catherine Stevens from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I'm calling about your daughter Emma's extraordinary work." The words seemed to hang in the air as I processed what I was hearing. The Metropolitan Museum of Art wasn't just any institution. It was one of the most prestigious art museums in the world, a place where only the most significant artistic achievements earned recognition. The fact that they were calling about Emma felt surreal and thrilling. Simultaneously, Catherine Stevens introduced herself as the curator of contemporary art and explained that Emma's work had come to their attention through the network of museum professionals who had been following her remarkable journey. The Met was planning an unprecedented exhibition called Visionary Voices: Art Without Boundaries, which would explore how exceptional artistic vision transcends traditional categories of age, training, and background. Emma's paintings represent exactly the kind of authentic artistic voice we want to celebrate, Catherine continued, her enthusiasm evident even through the phone. Her work demonstrates that genuine artistic talent operates outside conventional frameworks and deserves recognition based purely on its merits. The exhibition would feature work by artists whose abilities had challenged established assumptions about artistic development, including historical examples of prodigious talent, alongside contemporary artists who had achieved recognition through unconventional paths. Emma would be the youngest artist ever featured in a Met exhibition, but Catherine emphasized that her inclusion was based entirely on the quality and significance of her work. "We would like to feature 5 of Emma's paintings, including several pieces that have never been publicly displayed," Catherine explained. "We're also interested in commissioning a new work specifically for this exhibition, something that responds to the theme of artistic vision and creative authenticity." The commission she described was unlike anything Emma had been offered before. The Met wanted her to create a piece that would serve as a centerpiece for the exhibition, a work that would demonstrate her unique artistic perspective while engaging with the broader themes of the show. The project would come with resources and support that would allow Emma to work at a scale and with materials she had never had access to before. More significantly, Catherine mentioned that the museum was considering acquiring one of Emma's existing pieces for their permanent collection. The Met's collection represented the highest level of institutional recognition in the art world, and having work included would establish Emma's place in art history in a way that no amount of critical praise could match. When I shared this news with Emma, her reaction revealed how much her understanding of the art world had matured over the past year and a half. Rather than being overwhelmed by the prestige of the opportunity, she asked thoughtful questions about what the museum hoped to accomplish with the exhibition and how her work would contribute to that goal. "I want to make sure my painting says something important," she told me seriously. "If lots of people are going to see it at such a famous museum, it should help them understand what art can do." This response demonstrated the kind of artistic integrity that had developed alongside Emma's technical abilities. She was no longer simply creating beautiful paintings. She was thinking deeply about the purpose and impact of her work. Her approach to the Met Commission reflected this growth, as she spent weeks considering how to create a piece that would be both personally authentic and meaningfully connected to the exhibition's themes. The painting Emma eventually created for the Met Commission became what many critics would later identify as her breakthrough work. Titled "Where Dreams Begin," the piece explored the moment when artistic vision first emerges, using abstract forms and luminous colors to suggest the birth of creative imagination. Working on the largest canvas she had ever attempted, Emma created a composition that seemed to pulse with creative energy. Sweeping movements of paint suggested the dynamic process of imagination coming to life, while areas of delicate, almost ethereal color conveyed the fragility and preciousness of creative inspiration. What made the painting remarkable was how Emma had managed to make visible something that exists primarily in the realm of feeling and intuition. The work didn't depict creativity. It somehow embodied the experience of creative awakening in ways that spoke directly to viewers' own artistic impulses and dreams. The technical execution of Where Dreams Begin showed Emma's continued growth as an artist. She had learned to orchestrate complex color relationships across a large surface, creating unity while maintaining the kind of visual interest that sustained prolonged viewing. Her brushwork varied from bold, confident gestures to subtle, almost whispered applications of paint, demonstrating complete control over her materials. Dr. Stevens's response when she first saw the completed commission confirmed that Emma had achieved something truly exceptional. "This painting represents a quantum leap in Emma's artistic development," she wrote in her curatorial notes. The sophistication of concept and execution places her work in direct conversation with major contemporary artists, while maintaining the authentic voice that makes her perspective so compelling. The Visionary Voices exhibition opened at the Met in September with unprecedented media attention. Major art publications featured cover stories about the show, and Emma's inclusion generated international discussion about artistic talent, recognition, and the boundaries of traditional artistic categories. The critical response to Emma's work in this context exceeded anything she had achieved previously. Robert Hughes, the legendary art critic, wrote a lengthy piece for Time magazine that positioned Emma's paintings within the broader landscape of contemporary art, without any qualification or condescension related to her age. Emma Martinez's paintings demonstrate genuine artistic authority, Hughes wrote. Her work engages with fundamental questions about color, form, and emotional expression in ways that would be impressive from any artist, regardless of background or experience. The fact that she is 8 years old makes her achievements more remarkable, but not more important than the authentic artistic vision her paintings reveal. This critical validation from one of the most respected voices in art criticism represented a watershed moment in how Emma's work was perceived. She was no longer being evaluated as a talented child, but as a legitimate artist whose contributions deserved serious consideration alongside established professionals. The exhibition's success led to acquisition offers from major collectors and museums around the world. The Met exercised their option to acquire Sunshine After Storm for their permanent collection, making Emma one of the youngest artists ever represented in their holdings. The acquisition price, while modest by contemporary art market standards, established Emma's work as having genuine commercial value that reflected its artistic merit. More importantly, the institutional recognition provided validation that would support Emma's artistic development for years to come. Having work in the Met's collection meant that Emma's artistic achievements would be preserved and studied by art historians and critics, ensuring that her contributions to contemporary art would be remembered and analyzed long into the future. The impact of Emma's success extended far beyond personal recognition to influence broader conversations about how artistic talent is identified and nurtured. Educational institutions began reassessing their approaches to art instruction, with many programs implementing changes designed to better recognize and support exceptional abilities regardless of student age. Emma herself became an advocate for other young artists whose abilities were being overlooked or dismissed. She participated in educational panels and workshops where she encouraged both children and adults to take young people's artistic expressions seriously. Her articulate discussions of her own creative process helped educators understand how to better support developing artistic talent. Kids can see things that grown-ups sometimes forget how to see, Emma explained during one educational forum. Art teachers should listen to what kids are trying to show them instead of just teaching them what they think kids should know. This insight, expressed in Emma's characteristic direct style, captured sophisticated understanding about the nature of artistic development and education. Her perspective influenced policy discussions at the state and national levels, contributing to reforms in arts education that emphasized creativity and individual expression alongside technical instruction. The personal vindication I had sought when Dr. Patricia Whitman so cruelly dismissed Emma's work had been achieved beyond my wildest imagination. But the real satisfaction came from watching Emma develop into a confident, thoughtful artist who understood the value of her unique perspective. The external recognition had enhanced rather than replaced her internal motivation, and she continued to paint primarily because the process of creating brought her joy and fulfillment. Emma's studio, which had evolved from a corner of my workspace into a sophisticated artistic environment, became a destination for other young artists and their families seeking guidance and inspiration. We regularly hosted informal gatherings where children could share their work and receive encouragement from both peers and adults who understood the importance of nurturing young talent. These gatherings often included discussions about handling criticism, and maintaining confidence in one's artistic vision when faced with skepticism or dismissal. Emma's story provided a powerful example of how persistence and belief in one's abilities could overcome initial rejection and lead to extraordinary recognition. The transformation in our community's perception of Emma's abilities was complete and gratifying. The same neighbors and acquaintances who had once offered polite but dismissive comments about her cute paintings now spoke with genuine reverence about having a famous artist in their midst. Local businesses began displaying Emma's work, and her paintings became sought-after additions to corporate and residential collections throughout Austin. More significantly, Emma's success had inspired other parents to take their children's artistic abilities more seriously and to advocate more effectively when those abilities were dismissed or undervalued. Several families reached out to share stories of how Emma's example had given them courage to challenge negative assessments and seek appropriate recognition for their talented children. The broader cultural impact of Emma's achievements contributed to changing conversations about childhood, talent, and recognition. Her story challenged assumptions about what children could accomplish when their abilities were properly supported and encouraged, leading to more nuanced discussions about identifying and nurturing exceptional talent in young people. As Emma approached her 9th birthday, I reflected on the remarkable journey we had traveled together since that devastating night when her artistic abilities were so thoroughly dismissed. The woman who had compared Emma's painting to something a dog could create with its tail had inadvertently set in motion a series of events that established Emma as one of the most recognized young artists in the world. The irony wasn't lost on me that Dr. Whitman's cruel assessment had been essential to Emma's eventual triumph. If her work had been accepted politely at that school exhibition, I might never have sought the kind of professional validation that led to her extraordinary recognition. The humiliation had provided the determination necessary to prove, beyond any possible doubt, that Emma's talent was authentic and exceptional. Emma's artistic future stretched ahead with unlimited possibilities. She had established herself as a serious artist whose work deserved recognition based on its own merits, while maintaining the curiosity and enthusiasm that made her perspective so fresh and compelling. The foundation of recognition and validation she had achieved would support whatever directions her artistic interests might take as she continued to mature. The lesson I had learned through this experience extended far beyond the specific circumstances of Emma's artistic journey. When someone you love is underestimated or dismissed, particularly by those who claim expertise or authority, the most powerful response isn't always confrontation or argument. Sometimes the best vindication comes through persistent effort and unwavering belief, allowing achievements to speak louder than words ever could. Emma's story demonstrated that exceptional ability can emerge at any age and in any context, and that recognizing such talent requires looking beyond conventional expectations and assumptions. The experts who initially dismissed her work had been limited by their own preconceptions about what children could accomplish, while those who recognized her abilities had been able to see past her age to appreciate her genuine artistic achievements. As I watched Emma work on her newest painting, a piece exploring the relationship between memory and imagination that would be featured in an upcoming international exhibition, I marveled at how naturally she had grown into her role as a recognized artist. The external validation had strengthened rather than replaced her internal motivation, and she continued to create primarily because the process of making art brought her deep satisfaction and joy. The studio walls, now lined with paintings, from different periods of Emma's development, told the story of remarkable artistic growth and consistent sophistication. Visitors often expressed amazement at the clear progression visible in her work, the way each piece built on previous discoveries while exploring new creative territories. Emma's success had transformed our family's understanding of what was possible when talent was recognized and properly supported. Michael had become as invested in Emma's artistic development as I was, learning about art history and contemporary practice so he could better understand and discuss her work. Our home had become a gathering place for other artistic families, creating a community of support and encouragement for children whose abilities deserved recognition. The financial success that had accompanied Emma's recognition provided security and resources for continued artistic education, but it had never become the primary focus of our efforts. The real reward was in watching Emma develop her unique, artistic voice and knowing that her talent was being properly recognized and cultivated by the broader art community. Looking toward the future, I felt confident that Emma's artistic journey would continue to unfold in meaningful and positive ways. The institutional recognition she had achieved provided a strong foundation for whatever directions her interests might take, whether she continued as a visual artist or explored other creative fields. She would always have the confidence that comes from knowing her abilities are genuine and valuable. The vindication was complete, but more importantly, Emma's artistic future was bright with possibilities that no one could dismiss or diminish. Her talent had been recognized at the highest levels of the art world, and she had developed the skills and confidence necessary to continue growing as an artist for years to come. The girl who had once been told her paintings looked like something a dog could create with its tail was now represented in the world's most prestigious museum collection and featured in exhibitions that would inspire future generations of young artists. The transformation was total, and the future held unlimited potential for whatever Emma might choose to create next. Have you ever had someone dismiss something precious to you, only to watch that very thing flourish beyond their wildest imagination? Sometimes the greatest victories come not from proving others wrong, but from proving yourself right. Share your own story of triumph over dismissal in the comments below, because every voice deserves to be heard, and every dream deserves its moment to shine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.